The United States is preparing to press the red button for the second and perhaps most devastating wave of its blockade operation in the Strait of Hormuz. In response to Thrawn using this narrow strait as a bargaining chip, the Washington administration is deploying its greatest maritime trump card to the field. 2 massive aircraft carriers will be in the region and dozens of warships are locked directly onto Hormuz. Minesweepers, unmanned underwater vehicles, Navy SEALs, and tens of thousands of Marines are now making their final preparations. This massive force is spearheaded by the USS George H.W. Bush aircraft carrier, which set sail from Norfolk, housing what is essentially the air force of a small country on its flight deck. Having already navigated around the African continent and past the Strait of Gibraltar, this colossal floating fortress has locked its course directly and ruthlessly onto Hormuz. Over 70 F-18 Super Hornet fighter jets, dozens of Growler electronic warfare aircraft, Hawkeye early warning platforms, Seahawk helicopters, and nearly 5,000 personnel carrying what amounts to an entire army. This ship will provide support to the USS Abraham Lincoln east of the Strait of Hormuz, approximately 200 kilometers south of the Iranian coastline. The U.S. Navy is not stopping at just these aircraft carriers masked near the Arabian Sea because more than 15 highly advanced warships already positioned in the region are waiting on high alert. A massive shield comprised of Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers, Ticonderoga-class cruisers, amphibious assault ships, and naval replenishment platforms is about to descend into the warm waters of Hormuz. The guided missile destroyers are scanning the dark waters with their radars fixed on the Iranian shores. The massive amphibious assault ships carrying fully equipped Marines in their bellies are practically waiting for that single order to be given. Furthermore, one must not forget the nearly 3,500 troops of the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit backed by MV-22 Osprey waiting with fingers on the trigger in the Arabian Sea. And there is also the 11th Marine Expeditionary Unit of nearly 2,500 personnel advancing toward the Middle East. The U.S. Navy and Air Force are reinforcing the lock they have placed on Hormuz with this immense military might. U.S. minesweepers that set out from the Pacific to counter the invisible threat beneath the waters, namely Iran's deadly naval mines, are also quietly slipping into the region. Departing from bases in Japan, these ships are advancing westward toward the Middle East through the Strait of Mala without slowing down. Nets are being woven for a massive cleanup operation in the shallow waters of Hormuz. Constantly patrolling the skies, P-8 Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft are listening to their AI-supported sonars to sound the alarm at even the slightest anomaly underwater. This massive naval buildup carries a meaning far beyond a mere military show of force. This is the clearest visual proof that Washington's blockade strategy against Thrawn has now entered an entirely different, far more aggressive phase. Now the picture forming around Hormuz is quite clear, isn't it? The U.S.'s literal "we are coming" message is spreading across the entire region along with the warm winds of the Gulf. A massive steel army advancing from 3 separate fronts, crossing 3 different oceans all at the same time, all toward the same target. Not just for deterrence. The equation in Hormuz is about to change fundamentally. As a matter of fact, the consequences of this colossal force deployed to the field and the locked blockade in Hormuz are already being seen in all their naked reality. According to the latest field reports, exactly 10 commercial vessels facing the blockade were forced to turn away from their routes, bouncing off as if from a steel wall, and inevitably sail back toward Iranian ports. Even the 2 Iranian crude oil tankers attempting to depart from Chabahar port were intercepted by the U.S. Navy's Arleigh Burke-class destroyer USS Spruance. Following this tense encounter, the USS Spruance contacted both Iranian vessels via radio and ordered them to return to port. The U.S. has announced a formal blockade of Iranian ports and coastal areas. This is illegal action. All vessels are advised to immediately return to port if leaving and discontinue transit to Iran if that is your next protocol. Do not attempt to breach the blockade. This was recorded as the first harsh and concrete response of what appears to be Washington's second wave operation. In the toll of the operation's first 24 hours, with over 10,000 U.S. soldiers and dozens of naval vessels virtually locking down the strait, the number of ships able to pass through was literally zero. However, there is a very critical detail here that illustrates the ruthless nature of the operation. This lockdown only targets ships entering and leaving Iranian ports via Hormuz. Neutral commercial traffic heading to non-Iranian ports is left completely untouched. In other words, the U.S. is not stopping trade in the region. It is solely and directly attempting to eliminate the risk elements at sea. CENTCOM has already officially announced that the mine clearance operation in the strait has begun. The first wave of destroyers has passed and underwater drones are stepping in. But as we can see, the steel storm following them in the second phase is much larger, much more determined, and much more lethal. So with the world's most powerful navy at the gates of the strait, is Iran simply waiting in the face of all this massive power? Military activity on the Iranian side of the strait has visibly escalated over the past 48 hours. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy is trying to field the asymmetric warfare doctrine it has been preparing for decades for this exact scenario. Thrawn's strategy to regain control of Hormuz is ruthlessly simple: to continuously harass the massive U.S. ships with a large number of small, fast, and cheap assets, exponentially increase the cost of the operation, and escalate the tension in the international community a little more each day. For this reason, hundreds of speedboats are patrolling the Iranian shores of the strait, especially these days. Boghammer-class armed boats carrying machine guns and rocket launchers are shadowing U.S. destroyers at speeds of 40 to 50 knots. The Ashura and Tandar-class attack boats, on the other hand, are specifically designed for swarm attacks. They are small, agile, mass-produced, and programmed to execute coordinated attacks en masse. Global intelligence reports estimate that between 600 and 800 Iranian speedboats are active in the Hormuz region. If you recall, on April 11th, while the USS Frank E. Peterson Jr. and USS Michael Murphy were transiting the strait, the naval elements of the Revolutionary Guards attempted to swarm these two destroyers within minutes. Sharp and threatening final warning announcements blared over the radios. However, the U.S. side maintained its course, stating that they were operating in accordance with international law and rules of engagement. The Washington administration is demonstrating its resolve to continue this operation with the massive naval and air force power it has recently dispatched to the region for what amounts to a second phase. But Iran's risk strategy against the U.S. and Hormuz is not limited to just using speedboats and small crafts. Because the Tehran regime is ruthlessly trying to fill the skies over the strait with the drones they possess as well. It is claimed that there are currently over 200 active surveillance and attack drones in the region, including Shahed 136 kamikaze variants, Moajger 6 and Moajger 10 long-range surveillance platforms, and small FPV suicide drones. It is obvious here that TAN is building a dangerous plan around its UAV stockpile aimed at retaking Hormuz. These Iranian drones putting the strait at risk do not solely conduct surveillance. They also have coordinated swarm attack capabilities and can be used as a war of attrition tool to deplete the U.S.'s expensive defense missiles. This is perhaps the greatest risk factor that the potential second U.S. operation in Hormuz could face. However, Washington has learned how to deal with these obstructive drones in the region because on April 11th, during moments of peak tension, U.S. forces reportedly destroyed an Iranian surveillance drone. Nevertheless, the possibility of a drone swarm emerges as an issue that must be considered during every phase of this operation. Beneath the waters of Hormuz, however, the picture looks far darker. Reuters sources reported that the Revolutionary Guards have laid dozens of mines in the strait. A total of nearly 6,000 naval mines are being mentioned. These are not ordinary explosives. Maham, 3 type mines remain suspended in the water while moored. These risk elements are triggered the moment they detect the acoustic or magnetic signature of a passing ship. The Maham 7, on the other hand, sits on the seabed and detonates underneath ships passing over them in shallow waters. Moored contact mines detonate upon physical impact, and perhaps the most dangerous ones are the drifting mines. New York Times sources state that a significant portion of these mines have been caught in the Gulf's strong bottom currents and swept kilometers away from their original locations. Iranian media, meanwhile, is raising its tone a bit more every day. drawing strength from these asymmetric threat assets the TAN regime has created in the Strait of Hormuz. Statements declaring, "We will give the harshest response to any foreign military vessel follow one after another." Direct fire has not yet been opened, but the atmosphere in the strait has turned into a powder keg, needing only the spark of a match. Amid this climate of tension, the U.S. mine clearance operation continues. Knifefish-class autonomous underwater drones are detecting mines through sonar scanning. Mark 118. Mod 2 Kingfish unmanned underwater vehicles are locating hidden explosives by mapping the ocean floor with their torpedo-shaped bodies. Additionally, MH-60S Seahawk helicopters are sweeping for near-surface mines using airborne laser mine detection systems. When a mine is detected, SEOX expendable neutralizers come into play. This small fiber-optic guided robot swims directly to the mine and destroys both itself and the threat with a shaped charge. The cost of each SEOX is approximately $100,000. In exchange, the mine it neutralizes may have cost a mere $2,000. So in reality, operations of this kind are highly risky from a cost perspective. Such gaps might perhaps even give Iran the audacity to develop a flawed and dangerous game plan against the US in Hormuz. But what if the Tehran regime makes such an unexpected move? Let us now turn our eyes to that critical picture. The narrowest point of the strait is only 33 kilometers. This is a distance that a speedboat can cover in 20 minutes, a cruise missile in minutes, and a ballistic missile in mere seconds. The first possible scenario is a further escalation of the already familiar low-intensity tension. An Iranian speedboat or surveillance drone could approach U.S. destroyers inside the critical distance. This situation might perhaps cause the U.S. to finally press the button for its ultimate move. In such a potential clash zone, it is expected that Trump would likely not order warning shots, but rather give the direct order to destroy the threat. Once this order is given, naval and air force elements could launch a simultaneous striking operation. F-18 Super Hornets and EA-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft taking off from the Abraham Lincoln could double the density of air patrols over the strait. To find the threat directly in its lair and designate the target, the electronic warfare capabilities of the Growlers would likely come into play at this point. These aircraft have the potential to break the coordination among the speedboats by jamming Iran's communication frequencies. P-8 Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft, meanwhile, can continuously conduct aerial surveillance to monitor every Iranian vessel, every drone movement, and the position of every coastal battery in real time. The final blow will most likely be the destruction of the identified Iranian risk element in Hormuz. However, the second scenario points to a much more intense picture here. Iran's drone swarm potential could be brought into play. Iran could mobilize more than 100 speedboats and a drone swarm as a simultaneous coordinated attack wave. The underlying logic is ruthlessly simple: to saturate the capacity of billion-dollar defense systems with a vast number of cheap assets. While every Aegis interceptor missile costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, a kamikaze drone is a tool worth a few thousand and a speedboat tens of thousands of dollars. But in this situation, the US might bring one of the most specialized weapons in its arsenal to the stage. We are talking about those veteran powerful aircraft that we encounter at nearly every stage of the operation, namely the A-10 Warthogs. These aircraft were built exactly for such targets. Their 30mm GAU-8 Avenger rotary cannons can tear apart speedboat fleets by firing thousands of rounds per minute. A-10s are slow and loud, but when it comes to destroying hundreds of small boats, they are the most effective platform in the world. While Super Hornets provide close air support, A-10s can directly strike the boats, coastal drone launch ramps, and entrenched positions. B-52 and B-1 strategic bombers, on the other hand, could target the missile batteries and command centers further inland. In response to this attack wave, Iran could fire salvos of anti-ship missiles from coastal batteries in Bandar Abbas, Keshum Island, and Hormuz Island. Because they possess dangerous assets like the Nure, a Chinese origin C-82 derivative subsonic cruise missile with a range of 120 to 170 kilometers. U.S. forces, however, possess deterrent air defense assets in the region capable of destroying such missiles like the Aegis combat system, Patriot PAC-3 MSE batteries, THAAD, and NIAMs. But the Iranian side is also looking to deplete the missile stockpiles of these systems through a strategy of attrition. For this reason's missile stockpile always stands out as a major risk factor regarding a potential second phase operation. Where these missiles are hidden is another dangerous aspect, because the vast majority of them are truck-mounted and can rapidly change locations. The mountainous Iranian coast practically offers natural fortresses to conceal these batteries. Considering the narrowness of the strait, a 300-kilometer range seems more than enough for Tran to launch these ruthless potential attack waves. But what if the US attempts to use this recent naval and air power it has amassed in the Middle East for a completely different strategy prior to the second operational phase? Meaning at this point, President Donald Trump's long-standing ground operation signals might resurface. You may remember the elements we mentioned in the introduction. Approximately 2,000 to 3,000 elite Marines, MV-22 Osprey tilt rotors, and MH-60 Seahawk helicopters aboard the USS America and its support ships. These deterrent powerful special military groups could step in exactly at this potential stage of the operation. These special US troops are capable of deploying to any coastal target within hours. If the missile ramps or command centers on the Iranian shores continue to threaten US ships, a limited coastal operation option may not be taken off the table. The only thing that will determine which of these scenarios comes to pass might be whether or not either side makes a miscalculation. When you put all these pieces together, the resulting picture is clear. Washington does not just want to open the Strait of Hormuz, it wants to bring it under complete and absolute control. And the ultimate goal of this control might be to sever Iran's last remaining economic lifeline. One of these routes could be Karg Island, where 90% of the country's oil is exported. This is where the truly striking dimension of the story begins, because the US completely cutting off this energy line could directly hit not only Thrawn, but also Beijing thousands of kilometers away. Before the war, more than 90% of Iranian oil went from Karg Island to China. This flow was the largest source of funding feeding Iran's war machine. Every time a tanker departed Karg, millions of dollars flowed into Iran's military budget. Every barrel covered the production costs of the drones, speedboats, missiles, and mines sent to the front. Washington knows this very well, and for this precise reason, the naval surge goes far beyond a mere naval blockade, meaning the recent naval and air force elements the US has sent to the region and the ongoing blockade process in Hormuz are practically encircling both Iran and China. In short, the fundamental dynamics in the Middle East are now about to change. The US's final trump card on the crisis line, the asymmetric threats in Iran's hands, and behind the scenes, China's energy crisis. What kind of resulting picture all of this will present to us in the times ahead remains uncertain. So, what do you think about this issue?